It is said that YouTube killed television. Or rather, if it did not kill it yet, it will in the coming years. But the truth is, YouTube actually ended TV's monopoly era on video distribution. YouTube allowed channels like Red and Links to prosper naturally without having to go through all the trouble and expenses of actually getting their show to a low-end TV channel. Today, they have 12 million subscribers and an average of 3 million people watch their show weekly. But the internet is full of success stories like this. Right now, YouTube's main goal, and other YouTubers alike, is to make you believe that virtually anyone can make it big on their platform. You only need two things essentially: watchable content and an audience that will give you a chance. If we take a glance at the usual aesthetic look of popular channels, you will quickly understand that today's moving media forms could best be described through intensified continuity, or rather a style that's partly defined by cameras and rapid editing. In fact, it is technology that's the key driver in this new heightened audiovisual aesthetic. And software like Avid Editing, Pro Tools, or Adobe Premiere makes such a painterly, capture-based aesthetic possible. PewDiePie might be one of the best examples of this. YouTube's own star at the moment I'm writing this. He works only with one frontal camera in every single one of his videos. We're talking about just over 10-minute videos where all the audience gets is one perspective of their host. Through digital zooms, panoramic shots become a possibility, but the editing style remains extremely barbaric. Obviously, most aspiring YouTubers start out with a single camera. But PewDiePie, now a well-known millionaire, could easily afford a few more cameras that would allow him to switch perspectives back and forth, so that it doesn't become as boring or as ugly. In fact, he could easily afford a whole crew to shoot his videos and still make money at the end of the day from them. But he refrains from doing so, because it is this style that brought him fame, and continues to do so. Why would you ever change something that works perfectly? No one knows what Felix Kjellberg would be doing today if not for YouTube. And it wasn't even in his plans, nor should it ever be in anyone's plans to become a YouTube star. The randomness and the overcrowdedness of the website make it quite hard to predict whether your channel will have an audience that allows someone to make money or not. But it definitely made it possible for a new group of people to follow their passion and to try to make it something or anything. Gamers. As you might imagine, it is very hard for someone to make a living from playing video games. Or rather, it was. You used to have to be extremely good at video games to be able to be getting paid to play it. And the list of games that made this a viable option was extremely short. Games like StarCraft had monthly or weekly tournaments with good prize pots for the winners. But to depend on something like this made it almost impossible to make an actual living from professional video gaming. When Felix, or PewDiePie, joined YouTube on April 2010, he thought he would be able to entertain an audience by playing his favorite video games. He was very far from being called a professional at any of them. In fact, he wasn't even particularly good at anything he played. But the people who watched him stayed for his unique personality and joyous attitude towards both video games and life in general. A lot of people tried to follow in Felix's footsteps and make a very well-paid living through it. And so today, gaming has become the most watched and also most produced content on YouTube. But wait, videos are supposed to be a form of art. But to what point can video games actually even be considered art? And why would watching someone play video games be proper entertainment? Or anything even remotely close to being called artistic? A lot of studies on video games make claims that this rising medium will either elevate us and make us faster, more creative thinkers, or downright degrade us and make us illiterate, socially isolated, and more violent. Mark Prensky, on the other hand, argues that it is undoubtedly possible to combine computer and video games with a wide variety of educational content that allows us to achieve as good or better results as through traditional learning methods in the process. He ultimately defends that games can be very effective as pedagogical tools because of their structure containing goal-oriented tasks and rewards. There's little doubt about the possible advantages that video games might bring to our society, but could we actually be talking about them as an actual art medium? Johnson has a certain degree of reluctance in calling video games art. Video games are, as he says, less like novels than the complex logic problems we find in standardized tests. On the other hand though, he suggests that playing video games is all about finding order and meaning in the world. Have you ever looked at a drawing and felt a certain peace of mind? As if everything in the world made sense for a few moments? Did artists not try to find their own order and meaning through their art forms? We could spend days discussing the pros and cons of playing video games to us as human beings. But just like Brown says, it would be the equivalent of writing a story about the merits of the great novels and focusing on how reading them can improve your spelling. It's true enough, I suppose, but it doesn't do justice to the rich, textured experience of novel reading. As we have mentioned before, television's dominance over the media industry will hardly be broken. But it isn't only YouTube that threatens its monopoly. Just like Brown mentions in his book, video game enthusiasts are keen on the possibility that video games might overtake film as the leading entertainment medium. And in a WNYC New York Public Radio interview in 2003, New York Times Magazine writer Jonathan D. specifically said, "I can see a future in which the technology gets a little better, and I would be hard-pressed to think of a reason why anyone would go pay to see, for instance, a new James Bond movie, as opposed to playing the new James Bond game. As you can imagine, integrating yourself with the new James Bond adventure while remaining in a safe environment could very easily appeal to a wide range of people." Game designer Dennis Dyack even went as far as to make the more monumental claim in a Gamma Sutra interview that games are the most advanced form of art thus far in human history, simply because they can combine text, image, sound, video, and the actual human input into a unified emotional experience. I couldn't bring myself to kill the little girl, even though she had been surgically and genetically manipulated for the purpose of extracting stem cells, and so wasn't really human at all, or so I was told. Still, those big eyes, pigtail, and the pretty frock, I couldn't do it. Instead, I decided to save her, and as I did so, using my own genetically enhanced powers to regain her humanity, an emotion of sympathy and brotherly care swept over me. Later, my actions would revisit me in the most unexpected and emotionally satisfying way. The care that I had shown for the little sisters would be reciprocated by their own care for me. Grant brings up a very interesting point about video games and why they could be in fact considered the most advanced art form. Video games integrate something that no other art medium can, which is your own input as a person. No other art form denies you access to the rest of its content if you don't put together the effort and the time to play it. Imagine if a movie would suddenly stop and wouldn't continue unless you could shout out the name of the 3 side characters. Imagine if a book would suddenly close itself if you could not recall the name of the city the main characters were in. Imagine if a song would be interrupted unless you could sing the lyrics of the first verse. This does not cross our minds as passive consumers of art, but video games require you to actively experience their content. As Grant pointed out, some games bring emotions like sympathy and brotherly care, even though we know very well that it doesn't make sense to feel this way towards a cluster of pixels. A great example of a game that relies almost exclusively on its capability to make you feel this way is Undertale. One can easily do a very quick Google search on "can't bring myself to do the genocide route in Undertale," and countless results like "I can't get myself to play the genocide route" can't bring myself to do the genocide route, or even what makes people want to play the genocide route. Undertale is a game that allows you, the player, to completely decide the fate of every single enemy that comes forth to fight you. There's 2 routes the player can optimally choose from, the pacifist and the genocide one. Because of the novelty that was sparing opponents when no other game gave you that option, a lot of people initially went for the pacifist route and befriended all of the characters in the roughly 9 hours of gameplay. The thing is, at the end, you are given the chance to essentially restart the game and try the other route. But this would mean you would have to kill every single character that you befriended in the first playthrough. The bonds we as players created with these little clusters of pixels was so big that killing them after they had become our virtual friends was excruciatingly painful, and so a lot of people refrained from doing so, preferring not to experience the whole content of the game, even though they had already paid for it. This emotional bond is something that is also possible in television and film, though never to the point of refraining yourself from watching an episode because some character you cared dies in it.